If you're Canadian and you're not paying attention to this, you're missing the biggest shift in our country's history. Canada just changed the game with China.
Is Canada becoming a global superpower? This meeting with China just changed everything, and nobody saw it coming.
This meeting, this one conversation, it just rewrote Canada's entire future. And I'm not exaggerating. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. What you're about to hear is going to shock you because when Mark Carney sat down with Xi Jinping at APEC, something happened that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. This wasn't diplomacy, this was a declaration. Canada just announced to the world that we're done playing small, we're done following orders, we're done being America's polite northern neighbor who sits quietly in the corner. That era, it's over. And if you care about where this country is headed, if you care about your job, your future, your kids' future, you need to understand what just went down. So stay with me because by the end of this video, you're going to see Canada in a completely different light. And honestly, you're going to be proud. Now, before we dive in, quick thing. If you're the kind of person who actually wants to understand what's happening in the world, instead of just scrolling past headlines, hit that subscribe button right now. Because I've got an entire series coming on APEC, on Canada's power move in the Indo-Pacific, and on what this means for every single Canadian. You don't want to miss this. All right, let's talk about what actually happened. For years, Canada and China have been locked in this toxic, dysfunctional relationship. Huawei drama. The two Michaels detained as hostages. Canola exports blocked. Seafood shipments rejected. It's been a nightmare, and through it all, Canada has been paralyzed, caught between American pressure to isolate China and the cold, hard reality that China is the world's second largest economy and a massive player in everything, from clean energy to AI to the critical minerals that power modern civilization. We've been stuck, my friends. Completely stuck. Unable to move forward, unable to chart our own course, unable to do what's actually in Canada's best interest, but then Mark Carney walks into that room. And everything changes. Xi Jinping, one of the most powerful leaders on earth, personally invites Carney to China for follow-up discussions. Let me say that again. Xi Jinping personally invites the Canadian Prime Minister to Beijing. That's not protocol. That's not diplomatic courtesy. That's respect. That's recognition that Canada, under this leadership, is a serious player again. And then Carney says something that should be making headlines everywhere. He says, and I'm quoting directly, "That's what is now unlocked," which was not the case 24 hours ago. 24 hours ago, this wasn't even possible. Do you understand how massive that is? In one meeting, in one conversation, Carney just opened doors that have been welded shut for half a decade. That's not luck. That's strategy. That's a leader who understands how power actually works in the 21st century. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Because what Carney is doing isn't just about fixing a broken relationship with China. It's about something way bigger. He's repositioning Canada to be a global power. Not a middle power, not a regional player, a global power. And he's doing it in the one area where Canada has an absolutely crushing advantage: critical minerals. Listen to this. Canada is sitting on some of the richest deposits of lithium, cobalt, rare earth elements on the entire planet. The stuff that makes batteries, the stuff that makes EVs, the stuff that makes wind turbines and solar panels and every single piece of technology driving the green revolution. For decades, China has controlled the global supply chain for these materials. They've dominated extraction, processing, manufacturing, everything, and the West has been completely dependent on them. But that's changing fast. Countries are waking up to the danger of putting all their eggs in China's basket. Germany, Japan, the United States, they're all scrambling to find alternatives. They're desperate for reliable, democratic partners who can help them build resilient supply chains. And guess who's perfectly positioned to be that partner? Canada. We have the minerals, we have the clean energy to process them. We have the rule of law, we have the political stability, we have everything the world needs. And Carney just signaled that we're ready to step up. Just days before this China meeting, Canada hosted the G7 Critical Minerals Summit. Over 20 agreements signed, almost $2 billion in investment, the vast majority involving Canadian companies. That's not random. That's coordinated strategy. That's Canada saying, we're not just going to be a quarry, we're going to be a powerhouse. And when Carney talks about the disruption from China creating opportunity, he's absolutely right. Because every country that's trying to reduce dependence on Chinese supply chains needs somewhere else to go. And if Canada moves fast, if we invest in the infrastructure and the processing capacity and the partnerships, we become essential. We become the country the world can't function without. Think about what that means. For decades, Canada has been economically dependent on the United States. 75% of our exports go south of the border. That's given America enormous leverage over us. But if we diversify, if we build strong relationships with Europe and Asia and China, suddenly we have options. Suddenly we're not just reacting to what Washington wants. We're making decisions based on what's actually good for Canada. And that's exactly what Carney is doing. He actually said it out loud. He said, the era of rule-based liberalized trade is over. That's a massive statement. He's acknowledging that the old world order, the one where America sets the rules and everyone else follows, that's finished. And in this new reality, Canada needs to be smarter, more strategic, more independent. Some of you are probably thinking, wait, isn't this dangerous? Aren't we getting too close to China? And look, I get it. China's human rights record is terrible. Their actions in Hong Kong and Xinjiang, these are serious problems. But here's the thing, completely isolating China doesn't work. It doesn't change their behavior. It doesn't protect our interests. What it does is leave the field open for other countries to build those relationships while Canada sits on the sidelines with our values and our empty pockets. What Carney is doing is way smarter. He's engaging where it makes sense, on trade, on climate, on critical minerals, while still maintaining Canada's ability to speak out on human rights. That's not selling out. That's grown-up diplomacy. That's understanding that the world is complicated and that Canada's interests are best served by being in the room, having influence, actually shaping outcomes instead of just tweeting about them. Let me give you a strong example. Energy. Canada has one of the cleanest electricity grids in the world. Massive hydro, growing nuclear, enormous potential for offshore wind, like that project off Nova Scotia that could generate 50 to 60 gigawatts of power. But to actually build that infrastructure, to create the battery storage, to make it all work, we need technology. And right now, some of the most advanced battery and offshore wind tech comes from Chinese companies. So what do? Say no and fall behind, or engage carefully, protect our strategic interests? But recognize that if we want to electrify our economy, if we want to power the AI revolution, we need to be smart. Carney is choosing smart, and he's right. Because here's what nobody's talking about. The real race isn't just about EVs or solar panels. It's about data. It's about AI. Canada has some of the best AI research talent in the world. Toronto, Montreal, Edmonton. These are global hubs for cutting-edge AI development. But AI is insanely power hungry. The data centers needed to train these models consume massive amounts of electricity. If Canada can't provide clean, reliable, affordable power at scale, we lose that advantage. Companies go elsewhere. Investment dries up. We become a talent exporter instead of an innovation hub. But if we get this right, if we build out our clean energy infrastructure, if we position ourselves as the place where you can do world-class AI research powered by 100% clean electricity, game over. We don't just become an energy superpower, we become a technology superpower, we become the place where the future gets built. And that's the vision Carney is fighting for. That's what this China meeting unlocked. Not just trade deals, not just diplomatic niceties, a path to making Canada one of the most important countries on Earth. Now let's address the auto sector because I know some of you are worried. What about Chinese EVs? Aren't they going to destroy our industry? Look, Chinese EV manufacturers are incredibly competitive. They've invested billions. They're technologically advanced. That's a challenge. But Carney's not ignoring it. He's saying, let's proceed carefully. Let's protect our domestic industry where it makes sense. But let's also recognize that the EV transition is happening whether we like it or not, and we need to compete. We can't just hide behind tariffs and hope Chinese EVs go away. They won't. We need to innovate. We need to build partnerships that help Canadian companies level up. And we need to be honest about where we are and where we need to go. What I love about Carney's approach is that he's not ideological. He's not saying China is our friend or our enemy. He's saying China is a reality, a major player in the global economy that Canada needs to engage with strategically. Protect our interests, yes. Maintain our values, absolutely. but also seize opportunities where they exist. That's leadership, my friends, real leadership. Here's the bigger picture. Canada is positioning itself as what I call a strategic bridge. We're a G7 democracy with strong institutions and rule of law. But we're also willing to engage with major powers across the ideological spectrum when it serves our interests. We can work with America, we can work with Europe, we can work with China, and in a world that's fragmenting into competing blocks, that flexibility is incredibly valuable. As US-China tensions escalate, as the world becomes more polarized, countries in the middle need partners who can help them navigate. Canada can be that partner. We can facilitate dialogue, we can build bridges, we can create cooperation on climate change that requires global solutions. That's not weakness, that's influence, that's power, but none of this works if we don't strengthen ourselves domestically. We can't just dig stuff out of the ground and ship it overseas. We need to add value. We need to process those critical minerals here. We need to build manufacturing capacity. We need to invest in research, in education, in infrastructure that creates high-paying jobs for Canadians. And this is where I'm optimistic, because Carney gets it. His experience at the Bank of Canada and Bank of England gives him a deep understanding of how economies actually work. He's not thinking about the next election. He's thinking about the next generation. He's thinking about what kind of country we want to be in 2040 and 2050. Let me bring this home. What happened in that meeting between Carney and Xi Jinping represents a fundamental shift in how Canada sees itself. For too long, we've been a middle power that punches below its weight. We've been cautious, risk-averse, content to follow. But we have everything we need to be a major player: the resources, the talent, the institutions, the geography. What we've lacked is the courage to step up. And that's changing right now. Carney is articulating a vision of Canada as a clean tech leader, a critical minerals powerhouse, a technology innovator, a strategic bridge. And he's backing it with action, with investments, with partnerships, with diplomatic engagement that advances Canadian interests. Do you think, is it risky? Yes. Does it require careful navigation? Absolutely. But the alternative, sitting on the sidelines, playing it safe, letting other countries shape the future while we watch, that's not just risky. That's suicide. So here's my take. What Carney revealed in that meeting is that Canada is ready to be bold again. We're ready to compete, to innovate, to lead. And if we can maintain our values while doing it, if we can be the ethical, reliable partner the world is looking for, the next few decades could be the most successful in Canadian history. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Carney's right to engage with China on critical minerals and clean tech? Or is this too risky? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment. If this opened your eyes to what's really happening, smash that like button and share this with someone who cares about Canada's future. Subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive on APEC and Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy. Until then, stay curious, stay proud, and remember, Canada's best days are ahead of us. We'll talk soon.